Welcome to the Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens podcast. I'm Brandon Jaffe. Join us as we explore relationship and mental health issues by weeding out the trends in the mental health industry to uncover what truly works in improving our emotional well-being and relationships. At Inspired Resolutions Counseling, we specialize in providing interventions and resources for families with teens, focusing on topics such as teen mental health, parenting challenges, and family dynamics. All right, in this episode, I am going to talk about sports. I want to start off by saying I am pro sport. I think that getting our children involved in teams and leagues is awesome. It is a big part of my life. I've got sports on the brain because I just met with a group of friends who I met my freshman year, this summer actually, before my freshman year of high school. We were water polo players. Sports played a big part in me even going to college, getting a small scholarship to play in college, and I learned so many lessons, and it's a big part of who I am today. I preface that because I want people to understand where I'm coming from when I talk about the damage right now that I believe sports can cause in a lot of families that I'm working with. This topic has become another one of those things that often, in a month, I'll talk about it at least a couple of times with various families. And I think that overall, we have let the idea, the obsession with playing sports run away from us. I hope that as a society, at least the community that I'm in, I can't speak to every community, but I hope that we can start having a better conversation about sports and the role that it plays in our children's lives. I recently had a conversation. I've had this conversation with so many families. Parents come in, the children are acting out, not doing well in school. And as I break things down, the family is busy. And for many families, a big part of the busyness is sports and the pressure to not just perform, but show up. And as I take a look at it, I think one of the reasons that we've let sports get out of hand is that everybody knows it is important to teach your children to be a part of a team, to be able to show up even if you don't want to, and then to commit to something and follow through with it. And that's an important lesson. However, what I'm seeing is so many families out there whose entire lives are built around sports. So sports has become almost a main focus for a significant part of the year, rather than sports being something that is important for skill building and important for athletics and physical health and important for learning some life lessons that you schedule around other really important life things. I remember when I was young, I went to two different high schools and both had really good football teams. And I remember the school as a whole, the students would often complain that football players got preferential treatment and they got away with things that other people didn't get away with, and they got passes on certain school issues. And so this issue, to get to the point that we are now, I think has been a long time coming. And I do think that it's worse than it's ever been before. There is an excessiveness. There are some behaviors and attitudes when I hear some of the stories and even some of the things that I've witnessed in these leagues, whether it be baseball or it be soccer, football. What I'm seeing is that we have shifted the focus from being a character building tool, a way to get involved in the community, to the sport and the winning is everything. And I have seen grown men who aren't even the coaches throw absolute temper tantrums in front of children because their obsession with winning has become so great. And so you know you've gone too far if you are behaving in a way that should not be modeled for children. And if you think that yelling and cussing and making winning more important than your decorum and the way that you treat people, I'm just going to tell you, you're flat out wrong. You're wrong. You have some soul searching to do. That's one thing that I'm seeing and hearing a lot about when I hear friends of mine talking about sports. Often they are telling me about some wild, out of control parent for whatever reason. That's one thing we need to take a look at. When that's happening often, that there's something wrong. And I'm not saying it's everybody, but for it to even happen a few times throughout one season is kind of ridiculous. And I think that we've got this unhealthy tolerance for angry behavior in sports. So I don't even know that everybody recognizes when coaches and parents are out of line. The larger familial issue is the time commitment and the financial commitment. Look, if you're spending thousands of dollars in a season or in a year on your child's extracurricular sports activities, there's something wrong. And I have watched and worked with families for years. They will process that they feel this pressure, this commitment. They're torn between, if I don't pay this and I don't allow my child to go on this big trip across the United States for this sport or for this championship, then I might be putting my child in a position to be looked down upon, to be judged, and they might not get the opportunities that they would get elsewhere. And so the idea that we should teach them to commit to a team and follow through is a great message. But to create this dynamic where young children are frequently having to travel all over the states in order to participate in their sport is, in my opinion, just completely wrong. There's no point to that. That will indefinitely get in the way of family time. If you have a family where there's multiple siblings, it's going to split up the parents in a way that is unhealthy. That the financial commitment might make it so that families can't purchase or participate in other healthy family events. I know families who no longer take their family vacations, which I believe are really important, because they feel so pressured to commit to paying for these large sports trips and championships. And so the time commitment and the financial strain is absolutely a problem. It takes it from being this great community building and life lesson learning thing into what should be left for professional sports. Look, if you're making a living or you potentially are going to make a living, man, go at it, travel, take time away, kind of like building a career, take time away. But the fact is most of these players are not going to become professional players. And even at the end of the day, you got to put a lot of work into being a professional. But professional players are going to be professional players. They don't need, as children, to travel all over the world. That's not how it used to be. That's a very new societal norm. And it's just not necessary. And there is more harm being done to the family dynamic, to the family structure, than benefit for some child's life in the long run. The expectation doesn't come outright. It's not like everybody's going around, oh, you better. But there's just this underhanded, assumed pressure. And I think that a good coach would navigate, is this healthy for all parties involved on this team before they commit to a large tournament that is far away and is going to require that the team spend a lot of money and spend a lot of time. That's one issue I have. And I can't tell you, I have had this conversation so many times where my families I'm working with complain that they are not connecting in the marriage They feel burned out. They feel like the siblings are fighting all the time. They feel like they're just crossing paths in the night, so to speak, ships in the night, so to speak. And then when you unravel things, when you peel back the layers, they're bringing up all these sports commitments. And some families are very open and they know, hey, you know what? This is a problem. We need to start setting boundaries. We need to do something about this. But other families are in complete denial of the damage being done. And I've even had families where if I suggest, hey, that's a lot of time and money going towards this sport for this one child, I wonder if there might be some jealousy or frustration coming from the other children. I wonder if not making time for your marriage because of these sports is the problem. And for families that are in denial, they will come together and say, no. That's only part of the year. It's only for one season. And that's not the problem. It's interesting to confront them and say, okay, so it's just for the season, but how many hours, how many days? Oh, yeah. And then there's also these clinics that we do outside of the season and this and that. And so it just becomes mind blowing, the time commitment to sports. And again, I am all for sports. I am not for excessive sports in a child's lives, even if they want to do it. I've had parents say, okay, well, we asked the children and they said that they want it and this is their passion. I'm going, no. You ask them if they want to play. You don't ask them if they want to be excessive to the point that they are damaging the family dynamics and burning themselves out. It's your job to step in and put boundaries on sports, regardless of what the coaches are saying, regardless of what the families in your community are saying and doing. Because at the end of the day, your child is not going to make this a profession, and your child is not likely to get a scholarship. That, oh man, scholarship reminds me of a really interesting conversation I had with a couple of parents, and I was specifically talking to the dad. And the dad let me know, look, at a young age, we knew that our child was gifted and we want to make sure that he has every opportunity. And so they had come to me because basically the child had been burned out, didn't know if he wanted to play anymore, and that was causing havoc in the family. There was some arguments and back and forth with the coach at school. And this was a good kid who just didn't want to play. He was burned out. He was done. It was interesting because I had this conversation with the dad and I said, okay, look, I know that you have sacrificed. And the dad said, well, my sacrifice doesn't matter. But I knew it did. So I know you sacrificed time, effort, money, and you had this dream and your child shared the dream. Yeah, he did. We wouldn't have made him play. And again, I get that. But your child was a child. You were the adult. It was up to you to put the boundaries and to make it a healthy endeavor rather than an excessive endeavor. And I think that's the key is sports, as long as it's a healthy endeavor, is good for the family, the community, the individual. Once it becomes an excessive endeavor, it is damaging to the relationships you have in the community. It's damaging to your future endeavors and your future goals. It's damaging to the family unit. Back to this particular father, we got in a conversation somehow just about the financial commitment, and I had the dad do the math, and I can't even remember how this came up, but the dad ended up doing the math. And the amount of money this father had spent on training, leagues, equipment, extra coaching, special trips, just all the stuff, the amount of money that had been spent from the time this kid was like, I think 3, up until this child's junior year of college was so substantial that had that money been taken and put into some growing account, he realized, oh my gosh, I probably could have paid for college. And now I've spent all that money and my child doesn't even want to play for college. Now, we ended up in a good place, putting boundaries, helping the child kind of navigate. and ended up playing. It was interesting. I worked with his family for quite a while. So the child did end up playing, but in a healthier way, and took care of his own burnout. And what I saw was once the family basically told the coaches, hey, look, take it or leave it. This is how he can healthfully play for you. He's not going to be involved in this. We're not doing this anymore. What happened was the coaches bucked at first, and then because he was so good, just said, okay, we'll take him. And now here's what's wild, is once the pressure of playing, once the pressure of getting these scholarships and even having to play, look, we set it up so that if he didn't want to show up to a game, he didn't have to. And I know there were some extenuating circumstances. There were some things going on. I'm not saying that that should be a thing. But in this case, removing that pressure was so important. The kid never missed a game, however, performed better than he had ever performed. And he ended up getting a huge scholarship to a really good school and didn't end up taking the scholarship. He chose not to play in college. And as I followed this client, I mean, the success and just he's an amazing person and he made the right choice. But it's something for parents to think about. Look, it is our job to help our children do things in a healthy way, even if they don't agree, even if they throw temper tantrums, and even if coaches, friends, family are telling you that you're wrong. There's another interesting one, and that's sibling resentment. The fact is, if you have 3 kids, you're probably not going to have 3 kids who are really good and overcommitted to sports. And in the younger years, you do a lot of damage having them play all these sports. But what's interesting is in a lot of the families that I've seen, it's usually like one child that is overly committed to sports, and the other siblings miss out. They end up having to spend their life on the field, so to speak, in the car and having to run around. And if you have 2 kids that are overcommitted, there's this rivalry. The rivalry tends to be much less in families who have healthy boundaries with sports and are still putting their time, effort, and energy into their spirituality, into connecting with family and friends, into that home relaxed time, and into school. So the families that have that more balanced attitude regarding sports, what I've seen is that the sibling rivalry isn't as great. But when parents and the children as a whole are overly committed and overly obsessed to sports, what happens is you inadvertently entice this unhealthy rivalry. Now, if you have 2 that are fairly gifted, that rivalry it's, I'm going to one-up you, and then the resentment builds. If you have one child who's not very good and one child who's really gifted, what happens is you create a I don't care type of situation, but then I overly care, and then I resent that I can't. And that dynamic can exist anyways, don't get me wrong. But when you're overly committed, you enhance that dynamic probably tenfold. And it's not one of those things you can put your finger. It's not one of those things you can just talk to your kids and say, hey, don't build this sibling resentment and this sibling rivalry. I encourage you, especially if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, please remember to keep it balanced, regardless of what your children want or what your fantasy for their lives in sports may be, even if they're really good. Nothing says that just because your child's really good means that you have to become obsessed with that thing that they're good at. You encourage that thing that they're good at, and you still encourage a balanced life of experience in relationship, experience in sports, experience with family. And it's almost like if somebody is really gifted, parents give themselves permission or justify the overcommitment. And they tell themselves, oh, well, I'm just committed this way because I'm trying to do it for my child. I want to be supportive of their dreams. Well, be supportive of their dreams in a balanced way, not in an unhealthy way. And so, look, there's the dynamics that tend to make it unhealthy are the excessive time commitment, the financial strain, the unhealthy pressure to perform and be good and win tournaments. the sibling resentment and rivalry, then the unrealistic expectations. Look, your children's child development is going to create seasons where they are better than everybody, and then seasons where they're in the middle, and then maybe they have a season where they're not as good, and then they go back. What happens is when you have overly excited and overly committed parents, coaches, and adults, what happens is you accidentally, unintentionally create unrealistic expectations that are not based in child development, but are based in your adult mind's experience and hopes and goals. And then the burnout, not just for the kids, but burnout for the parents, the kids, the family. And there are other factors that make it unhealthy, but those are the top 6 off the top of my head that I can think of. And then real quick, I want to give you a start, I guess, on what to do and how to look at it. The first is you've got to have boundaries. I talk about boundaries all the time. You as a family should be asking yourselves, how much time am I willing to give? Not how much time does this Yahoo insane coach expect of me, but how much time am I willing to give? And only give that, set a boundary on that. This is where we commit. I can remember as a young water polo player, there was this guy that I knew who was really good, and he did not play on Sundays. His family took that as a Sabbath day. I played with him when I was young, and then I saw him when I was in high school, and then I briefly met back up with him in college, and he had a great career. He was good. Not playing on Sundays as a child did not affect his ability to play water polo to the best of his ability in terms of making it to college and everything else. So set boundaries. And then if you're going to commit heavily in sports, your family should be sitting down before every season, before taking the registration, before paying for that, and communicate and talk and think about what you're going to do and make sure that you are considering everything before you turn that registration in. Communicate with the coach ahead of time. Here's our boundaries. Do you still want us on the team? And then stick to a budget. You should not experience any financial strain trying to get your child to play sports. Talk to the coach about grants or financial forgivenesses if it's going to be a burden, and if the financial strain, the damage that causes to families is far greater than any benefit you're going to get by going into debt, so to speak, in sports. You shouldn't be going into debt financially. You should not be going into debt emotionally. You should not be going into debt with your sleep and your energy. Confront coaches, man. I think parents should confront coaches who are overly focused on winning. I get that once you're on a high school team, parents really should be kind of separate, and that's a different deal. But we should be talking about and teaching growth over winning always, in all instances. And we should be reminding the people who are leading these leagues and teams about that. And then if there's more than one child at the end of the day, your choice to have more children is an awesome one. It creates so many cool dynamics in the family. But one thing that you have to realize is there's less time and money for each sibling when you have more siblings. Therefore, be honest about that and act and set boundaries accordingly. You should always be asking for help. Ask for help. Get other parents to help you give rides to your children if you need, and don't be afraid to ask for help in terms of the responsibilities that come with signing your child up for sports. And then be realistic. I don't think many families are outwardly going, oh my gosh, I'm going to create this child who's a professional ball player. But I think that there's this unspoken fantasy for scholarships and becoming great one day through sports. And I think that all parents need to be realistic, and that should never be the long-term goal. When your child is young and when they're early teens, the goal should be growth. The goal should be life lessons. The goal should be athleticism. But I'm creating a professional athlete should not be the attitude. So just be realistic. And for most people, it's just not realistic to think that they're going to make a career out of this. And if they are going to make a career, being balanced in the family and in the sports playing, I promise, is not going to make a difference. It's not going to create a situation where, oh my gosh, they didn't become a professional ball player because they didn't burn themselves out and they didn't ruin the family dynamic by overcommitting. In fact, studies in psychology will say the balanced players, the ones who are not overcommitted, become the greatest players. I know that I'm just barely touching this subject. It's one that I hear a lot. It's one that I felt compelled to talk about today. I see it as I raise my own child, already starting, and she's very young. I often say, hey, let's start a conversation about this. I want us to start a conversation about this. I want families to start standing up to coaches and leagues, and I want us to just be healthier, because sports in the world is huge. It has literally saved some people's lives. But right now, we are in a time where it's also breaking down the family dynamic. And in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, it is causing more damage in families than good.
The Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens podcast is an Inspired Resolutions production. Hosted by Brandon Jaffe. Edited and mixed by Natalie Atkinson. Music by Natalie and Sean Atkinson. Inspired Resolutions Counseling is based in Yorba Linda, California. Whether you're interested in joining our group, seeking therapy services, or exploring more of our resources, you can find us on our website, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Inspired Resolutions Counseling.